here we are, the end of the summer and the beginning of our art history class. So art history is one of those difficult things to kind of wrap around your mind because from an early age we've either been drawing or writing or doing math, all those things that are part of any academic career. But art history is something that's probably the first time you've taken a subject like this before. So let's delve into exactly what it is. We've got two almost opposite types of words, art, right, and history. And when you think of it in an academic setting, those things conjure up two different things, right? There's the making of art and there's the studying of history. And I like to describe art history first of all, it's just kind of like the signature of civilization. Right? These are the pictures that give voice to history. So if imagine your own personal family, your grandparents, your parents, or if you know your great-grandparents, and you have pictures of them, seeing those pictures will be quite moving. Seeing their faces, seeing what they look like, and seeing yourself in those images as well. And so art history is the same way. We are going to be looking at the photographs or the images of our ancestors, beginning with the cave painters all the way up to modern art. And hopefully we're going to be able to not only understand that artwork better, but also see a bit of ourselves in that artwork. One of the big things that we're going to learn is the art of looking. Leonardo da Vinci, an artist you probably know without even having to take this class, is a famous Renaissance artist who said that we needed to saper vedere, which means to know how to see. And that really does sum up art history. We are going to learn how to see. So by looking at these works and really delving into them, we are going to be able to see and make out what the artist was trying to tell us. When you kind of think about somebody talking about art, a lot of times we think about, you know, some artist with a beret and a cigarette in a cafe somewhere talking about art, or an art critic talking about art, but using these big fancy words that kind of separates us from the possibility of connecting with a painting or a sculpture. When the artist created these works, they don't intend for an art critic or somebody who knows about art to be in between the art and us. They expect us to actually look at it and appreciate it, interact with it as humans. So to kind of relax us a bit, the best way to begin this art history journey is to actually look at artwork that you're probably more familiar with than any other famous works of art, and that is the drawings of children.
So you can take just about any work by a young child and start to make some connections with works of art that we'll be looking at sometime in the future. And let's just take this one for instance. We have a figure. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 large brown things, and if you then begin to make connections, you can see that the figure is white and black, and you then can assume that possibly that it's a panda bear, right? Taking away that color, we would end up with a figure who could be human, who could be a cat, could be a dog. But the black and white, that color information does indeed give us a clue as to what this is. By then figuring that out, we can then deduce that those 6 alien rock green hair, you know, looks like a rock band of some sort, is not actually a family of 6 aliens, but in fact is, we can deduce that it possibly is bamboo, right? If it's a panda, then possibly that vegetation there can be a bamboo. So a series of connections can be made with images when you look at one thing and begin to connect them with other things. One thing that this brings up in this particular work of art is something that's called space, or in this case, negative space. There's actually more parts of this paper that are not drawn than there are images that are drawn. So we refer to that as negative space. The work with the drawing is referred to as positive space. If you turn your attention to a little bit more complex image like this one, we have in the bottom right-hand corner, again, something similar with the other work, a panda, right? It's got more or less the same shape, although the proportions are a little bit better, a little shorter, a little more round. That of, the figure of a panda looks more like that. It's got the black and white, so we refer to it as a panda. And then, like the other one, we can maybe deduce that these large, like palm trees, can possibly be bamboo. So something that we learned from the other one, we can bring over to this one. So we can take two works of art and make contrast, compare the two, which we often do in art history. The difference here, though, is we then have what looks like a human, right, in the center. And when things are in the center in art, for the most part, they are going to be the things that are more important. Just like this child who may or may not have known that by putting the thing in the center, subconsciously calls our attention to that. Now, in this case, we have a name floating on top of it, Alessandro. Now, that could be the actual artist, in which case this is a self-portrait. Or it could be a close friend or family member, right? If you then look at the floating things up top, there are three brown things that sometimes people say are butterflies, or they can be referred to as possibly half-filled hearts. And so if they're half-filled hearts, we can maybe deduce that there is some sadness here possibly, and we can maybe begin to kind of understand what this drawing is about. Unlike the other work, we have not a lot of negative space here. We have most of the space is filled up with drawing. We have the sun peeking in the right-hand corner, the panda in the bottom right-hand corner, the hearts, Alessandro, the name, the trees. And so there's a lot of used up space here. So positive space is an important part of this work. Now, children's art can actually get more complex. This looks like somebody who's, probably in their in their tween years or early teen years. Of course, we doesn't take a art connoisseur or professional art critique to realize that this young artist seems to have a little bit more ability to draw than the other two. So we have here no pandas, right? Nothing in black and white, but we have what looks like a group of 5 people. Now, let's take a good look at all those elements that are in this drawing before we talk about these individuals. We have in the background, right, we refer to things that are farther back as background. We have a series of trees followed by this wall, and it's not a concrete wall. It doesn't look too modern. It looks like it's a stone stacked wall. We have a little bit of grass, then what looks like a road, and so that fence and that wall and that grass there would be in the middle ground, and then the 5 individuals and the car would be what we refer to as the foreground. So we have the foreground where the people are, the middle ground, and then the background here. So let's delve into these 5 individuals. So let's ask ourselves some questions. And these things, when we look at a work of art, your brain can kind of begin to pick up this information pretty quickly. And because it's a children's work of art, we don't assume that we don't know what we're looking at. We can kind of enter into it pretty easily. We can see pretty easily that they're not happy, right? No one seems to be smiling. They are all have bags in their hands, so we can presume it's not grocery bags. It looks like some suitcases there. So it looks like they're leaving on a trip. Now, one of the things we can take into account here is that they're not happy. They have a luggage in their hand. But that child there, if you look at the way the artist has drawn the hand of, I presume, the mother in the red dress and the little boy in the yellow shirt, that boy looks like he's being dragged away. So, in other words, imagine if the family, let's say, is going off to Disneyland, right? That child would be way ahead of that mother. It would almost be impossible to get, to kind of pull back his energy as he's trying to get to the car and off to Disneyland. So it looks like they're going somewhere that nobody really wants to go, which may be an important clue to understanding this drawing. If you then look to the far left, we have what looks like half of a car. Now, our brain doesn't assume that there's only half of a car, right? It's not like we can say, oh, this family of 5 has left their house and they're sad because they're looking at the car, which has been cut in half. No, we assume that the rest of the car is somewhere off the page. And we can imagine, because it's somewhere off in our imagination, that they're going to get in this car and head off to the left somewhere. So the car is yet another piece of important information, because if we begin to put these pieces together, we can maybe kind of understand when would this drawing was made. Because if you look at that car, it doesn't look like a Tesla, it doesn't look like a minivan. It looks like a car that maybe was made sometime in the 30s or 40s. So, car that was made in the 30s or 40s, a family who doesn't look very happy to be leaving, and that fence doesn't look like a modern or fence of any sort. It looks like it's stacked stone, something, let's say, you'd find in Europe possibly. And by putting all these clues together, the family who doesn't want to leave, the car, the wall, we can maybe begin to understand that this drawing was made by a child who was experiencing the traumas of World War II, possibly a Jewish family, or possibly maybe here in the United States. If you think about Japanese who were interred in California, put in camps, that possibly that this is about somewhere closer to home here in California. So just like those drawings of pandas earlier on, where we assumed it was a panda bear, and then because we assumed it was a panda bear, we then assumed that it possibly is a bamboo plant. In our next step here, we took a drawing that's more complex, put all these things together, and possibly this work is from World War II, which indeed it is. Sometimes children's art, though, is pretty hard to kind of understand. So the same kind of thing that most people feel like when they go into a gallery that has, let's say, modern art, right? If you look at this particular work, your first reaction would be, well, what am I looking at here, right? But if you sit with the work a little bit longer and kind of realize that maybe there's something more in this than just a bunch of scribbles. So we see color, we see lines, and when we begin to look at those lines, they're done in different manners. We have straight lines in the center that are red, some to left that are brown. We then have swirly marks in the bottom right-hand corner and left-hand corner, right? And this is the type of work where you can actually almost feel the child placing the pencil on the paper and kind of moving their hands around. You can kind of feel the gesture, right? The process of the work. If you then begin to look beyond those lines and colors, you begin to see some forms that possibly could be something that we can begin to identify. We see that those lines are leading to various objects that look like, in the bottom right hand corner, there's like these blue lines that look like a building. In the upper, let's say, sky, the upper right hand corner, there's actually a blue jet that looks like it's dropping bombs. In the upper center, it looks like a helicopter. And on the bottom center, there's a red, large filled-in object that is indeed a tank. And so when you put all this together, this is actually reflecting the chaos of war. And this particular child did experience war, experience living through a war, and actually several bombings in the former Yugoslavia. And so when you take that into account, you can see that this is actually a very good reflection of this child's experience, right? The kind of chaos of war, the noise, the colors, right? We can hear this drawing even though it has no sound. And so this is really an advanced work of art, even though it doesn't look like anything per se. Some of the work is not from the far past. As a matter of fact, it's events that are happening right now. If you look at this work, it has no color. It's pretty straightforward. We see stick figures. It's black and white. But the fact that it has no color is also important, right? It's very bland. It's a bit sad. We can see the figures that are behind what looks like a fence, and then there are figures that are outside of that fence. And those that are inside look to have frowns, and those who are on the outside seem to have smiley faces. And As a matter of fact, these drawings are not of World War I or World War II or of any other era, but they're from now. These are children who are housed in cages on the border, and therapists are working with those children to help express their emotions through artwork. And you can see pretty clearly how they've envisioned their circumstances in this drawing. And in the case here, we have actually two drawings by two different artists who are experiencing the same thing. The drawing before was, you can see a group behind cages who are on the inside, where there's a group on the outside, kind of highlighting those differences. But in this case, you have more an individual reaction to those this experience of being in a cage. And so this child, you can see the lines, the straight, harsh lines that are going vertically up and down. And then you can see her round face, her large eyes, her frown, and then these literally these kind of blood tears coming from her face. And so you can't help but empathize with this young child and kind of connect on a human level the experiences of being kind of caged, not kind of, but literally being caged and separated from their loved ones. So by analyzing these children's works of art, hopefully we can get the confidence as we move and look at famous works of art like these, to know that we're looking at just a group of artists, humans, who've applied paint or pencil or stone, fashioned it into something, and that we can look at this with our own eyes and begin to discover what they had to say about themselves, about the times they lived in, and hopefully in the process we can learn something about ourselves and our own history.